So that was the beginning of Stillwater Bay in its history with logging. 1914, the flagpole, 230-foot tall flagpole, was sent to Kew Gardens from here. Okay. 1926, Brooks and Scanlon wind up logging in Stillwater. 1926 was the last year. And it's interesting, back in the 80s, got a call from a teacher in Astoria, Oregon, and he would bring his pupils up to Canada, and they would do a little tour of the southwest corner of British Columbia, and he'd take them to the Parliament buildings, he'd take them to the seashore, they'd stop off in some of the islands on the way home and whatnot, but they just, you know, they learned a bunch of things. One of the things he wanted them to learn was about forestry, and so he asked if I would take his class out to Stillwater and do that. And sure enough, it came up whatever. Anyways, he was married to the Scanlon, the daughter of the Scanlons. And the last I heard of Scanlons, they were down in South America. Where was it? I can't remember. But anyways, okay. 1930, Powell River Company began construction of the dam and powerhouse. 1940 to 1960, Alice Lake Logging and O'Brien Logging, they logged at Stillwater and were part of the Powell River Company. And they had the three camps, A, B, and C. And Camp B is where the fish farm is right now. And I don't, A, does anybody know if A was Stillwater Bay or not? I tried to figure that out, I couldn't. Anyhow, yeah, about 140 men at that time. Okay. And they used to dump the logs in the lake in Lois Lake and bag boom them down, and then pull them out of the water and take them down to Stillwater Bay. Anyway, so that happened. 1944, they said they figured there was enough normal cutting for another 8 to 10 years. 44. I don't know who decided that. 1955, all the rails were removed and the grade became a truck road. In 1960, M&B, McMillan Bloedel, they amalgamated with the Powell River Company. Okay. And that's when the Stillwater Timberlands came into being. Okay. Let's see. Skip over a few of these things. I don't know if anybody knew that the hotel at Stillwater Bay was home for some nuns. Put in single mothers to help them. Mothers, they called them in those days, I guess. Okay. 1961, a tree farm license was granted. Tree farm license. Do any of you, are you familiar? Where am I starting from? I guess. Are you familiar with tree farm licenses, or have any idea what they are? Some? Yeah. 1947, going back to 1947, there was a Sloan Commission. I don't know if anybody remember the Sloan Commission. Anyways, that established an area-based, like Stillwater, area-based tenures to manage on a sustainable level. 1947. Okay. 1961 for MB to get Stillwater. Okay. Part of tree farm license 39. The thing about tree farm licenses is that the land belongs to people. The timber does as well. And companies have the right to the timber, but they have to manage it. That's the timber nowadays, but that's one of the big differences. Those days, timber. So anyhow, that occurred in 1961 and has been renewed ever since.
You got your cell phone?
Oh, here I am. I got to stand here. Okay. Yeah. 1965. I don't know how many of you realize it, but there were about 6,000 acres of thinnings, commercial thinnings that were done beginning in 1965. And we completed our thinning program in 1976. And what that entails is that we went into stands that were old enough to log, 80, 90, 100-year-old type stands out in the typical thrifty mature, what we call thrifty mature stands out in the Stillwater area. And we took out a third of the volume with cables and ground equipment. And we took out the worst so that when they came around to log it again, it was all good timber and healthy timber. We took out the broken top trees and diseased ones, misformed, all that sort of thing. And that was a very successful program. I can't tell you how much wood was taken out and all that, but 6,000 acres worth, I don't know, but a lot of wood. It's a big program. 1985, the canoe route was started. They started to undertake the development of the canoe route. And in 1990, we conducted or started to talk about alternative silviculture systems. And at that time, we started trials out at Paradise Valley, and I'll talk about that a little bit later. 1991, a 30-year reserve reverted to the tree farm license, made it bigger. I don't know if you know what a 30-year reserve was, but when they granted the tree farm license, they set aside an area in the Eldred River Valley, right above Goat Lake, all that Eldred River country up through there. That was all set aside for timber sales for all of the loggers that were going to be displaced from being able to log inside of the tree farm license. Okay, so that went on for quite a while, and there were a lot of different companies. Weldwood was the major company that went in there and was logging up in the Eldred River area. I'll follow up the alternative silviculture systems. We'll talk about that. Yeah, again, okay. 1996, the 20 millionth seedling was planted. When I came here in 1974, the most frequent question I was asked was, do you plant trees after you log? And they'd been doing that since 1961, and it was part of being the good steward of the land. But they planted the 20 millionth in 1996. When I retired in 2002 or 2000, around 2000, 2001, we planted 30 million. So there's lots of seedlings up there. And they're growing quite well, pretty much. In 1998, McMillan Modell announced the phasing out of clear cutting to be replaced by variable retention. That's a phrase you'll be more familiar with at the end of the night. And then 1999, Weyerhaeuser bought out McMillan Modell. And that same year, we started to undertake the creation of our community advisory group to be able to certify our forests as being managed on a sustainable basis for all the values, not just timber. So those are some of the dates that I could dig up and remember from the past. I don't know if there's any other momentous things that happened since then or not, but yes.
In the 60s, were seedlings for replanting paid by the company or by the government?
Well, this is where they're paid by the company. Stumpage, I better explain stumpage real quick. If it cost you $50 a cubic meter to log the timber, you would have those costs, and then an allowance for profit and risk as well, and then the difference in the selling price or market price for the type of log it was, you would subtract those costs of logging and profit and risk, and that's what you would pay in stumpage to the government. Okay, so they got the lion's share of things generally. So anyhow, does that help? Yeah, we'd have to somewhere in there are costs of all the administration and silviculture are included in the calculations for your stumpage. So in effect, you do eventually get paid, but not you know, they don't pay you right at the moment you plant a tree. Is that clear? Okay. All right. So it's a big subject, years of forestry, what's happened in 50 years. So I broke it down into technology and science, and then social political. Okay, and so I'll just take a few moments to give you an idea of what some of the changes have been in forestry and forest management since I started. So technological improvements, of course, I think of computers, right? Huge advantage in terms of managing forests, because there's so much information that you have to gather out in the woods to do things the way we're doing them now, that computers, wonderful. GPS, all of our boundaries are accurate now. Okay, there's no mistakes, generally speaking, in normal operations of GPS and locating, you know, where your boundaries are going to be and so forth. And then there's also the machinery. The machinery we had in those days were cable yarders, skidders, cats, that sort of thing. When they built a road with a cat 50 years ago, they'd be taking the overburden, pushing it off to the side, and then plowing ahead. Backhoes came into being, and you didn't have to do that. You could take the material from your road building, and you could haul it away or cut and fill it somewhere else. Big changes there. Aircraft. We had helicopter usage here and there when I first started for the remote places that we had to get to. But generally speaking, helicopters weren't used very much. When helicopters came into regular use, the shake bolt cutters, their areas were able to expand much wider than they were previously, because they didn't have problems getting the blocks from one place to the other. They just lifted them up into the air. And so there was a big shake block program that went on here for, almost, well, still going on a little bit, but it went on for quite a while. So there were these technological changes that have made a big difference in what we can do and what we can do. We have machines now for mechanically falling, and they're working in rough terrain nowadays. You know, they can go 30-35% or more in some of the ground that we have, and it has made a big difference in terms of the quality of the logs that we're sending out, the uniformity of the lengths, all that sort of thing. So it's been a really good advance in that field. Yeah, give you an idea. I remember where I had it. People at home. I don't know if they can see it very well, but that's a bunch of trees that are laying along the mountainside in a helicopter logging block. Okay. Helicopter logging. Pass that around. But what they're able to do in areas like that is they can take the color bunchers that they use, and they can take them apart, and then they can fly them up on the mountainside, assemble them again, and go to work that way. So it's gives you makes a lot more of your timber accessible and economical to be able to harvest it. Science, just look at science. We're really fortunate in British Columbia to have an ecological basis for our management of our forests. It was started by Vladimir Krajina. He was a Czechoslovakian that immigrated to Canada, and the whole province was mapped out on a broad scale into different ecological zones. And the Forest Service has taken those ecological zones, and they have developed a whole bunch of different ecotypes that belong within them. And we have developed a system to determine what we want to reforest in the different blocks that we log based upon the ecological information that we have. Didn't have that back in the earlier days, and that's been a big improvement. Nursery practices. When I started, there was very poor survival of different species other than Douglas fir, because they just hadn't mastered how to grow them, how to get the seeds to germinate, and so forth. And so, as you probably realize, when the loggers started logging along the coast, they started at the beach and then worked their way back, and then they get up into the mountains. Okay, and that's where we were when I came here in 1974. A lot of stuff up in the mountains, and over that and through that time, we were able to get improved nursery practices. So we were able to plant back the yellow cedar that was up there, or mountain hemlock that was up there, or a marvelous fir that was up there. So we didn't have that tool at the time, and that's come along for things as well. So we can match our species with our sites and our ecological types. In terms of silviculture, when I started, there was a pre-harvest silviculture prescription. For you folks at home, you don't need to see the details, but you just need to know that pre-harvest silviculture prescription was a one-pager when I started. Improved quite a bit. I don't know if you want to know details that are on a silviculture prescription, but just to give you a little idea, we have talks about soils, talks about stocking requirements. What else we got? Terrain stability, riparian assessments along all the creeks and streams. Okay. Wildlife tree patches. We'll get into that a little bit later too. Backup data. Then it talks about the harvest systems that we're going to use, the leaf trees, species, and what their functions are. Soil disturbance again. Yeah, and then all the ecological information that accompanied the site and site preparation plans. And the last one. Oh, of course, woody debris management strategies. Okay, so they've gotten a lot more complex and detailed. I'm going to take my sweater off because I'm too warm. Yeah. Okay. So those are just some of the changes that have occurred science-wise. Of course, there's global warming, and we started talking about global warming back in 1980 at our annual meetings, what we're going to do about it. And if you don't think something's happening, well, I can tell you we've never had Swiss needle cast disease here ever before, and it's here now. So Douglas, it's a Swiss needle cast. It's not really from Switzerland. It's from Oregon. It was discovered in 1925 when some seedlings from Oregon went to England, or to Switzerland, I'm sorry, to Switzerland. And a few years later, they were exhibiting the needle cast. And so it was given the name Swiss needle cast, but it originates in Oregon. And it's worked its way up through Washington State, and it's here now, and we're seeing it in our community forest. So I'm sure at the Stillwater TFL, they're experiencing it out there too. And what it basically is a disease where the tree drops all of its needles except the ones that were growing this year. Okay, so you end up with all these bottle brush kind of appearances on the trees. So we have that here now. They've been dealing with it down south for quite a while, and it's changing all their reforestation prescriptions because they need to have trees that aren't affected by this. And so I'm sure there's lots of breeding going on and all that sort of stuff, and different experiments in terms of, you know, how many Douglas fir in a stand is safe, or all that sort of thing. And we're going to have to do the same thing here. Anyhow. Yeah. And yeah. Now you might say, oh, well, what about all the moths that are flying around? And yeah, it affects all of the hemlocks. I'll turn that, you see me better. Affects all the hemlock, and when it's heavy enough, they go after the fir as well. And there's lots of examples of that right in town that you can see. Anyhow, it's native to here. It's nothing new. The 40s, they had the same sort of outbreak of the moth, and there's been outbreaks every 30-40 years on a regular basis since. So it's not a new thing for us here. It's just another thing added on. For some reason, it's hit us here. So a few years ago, it was Jervis Inlet, and it was down in Vancouver area. So it just rears its ugly head every once in a while, and it's temporary. Goes away, and we'll see it for a long time. But if we get warmer all the time, well, I don't know what that'll do. But anyhow, Swiss needle cast. Yeah. So sociologically and politically, it has changed a lot in 50 years, right? We had we've had the green movement in response partly to the global warming. We have certification, forest certification for our products. We have a Canadian Standards Association certification, and that is a certification system that requires the companies to have public input into their plans, and that's where the community advisory group came about. And part of that consultation requires a development of a series of items that you can measure to determine whether you're being you're managing sustainably or not. And it can be a simple thing like we don't want to maintain the forest land base. Okay, don't take forest land out of the forest and use it for something else. And so you just measure year after year the size of your land base. Very simple. Another example would be, are you logging the profile of your timber, or are you high grading it? Okay, and so there's an indicator that tells you what the amount of hemlock that you have in your forest, and the amount of fir and the cedar and all that, and you compare what you've taken against what your profile is, and that's done on an annual basis. Okay, so there was over 100 indicators that we developed with the community advisory group to measure our performance, basically. Okay. How many fires have you had? One indicator might be, have you reduced the number of wildfires or operational? Okay. So it covers anything that you want to measure in the forest to see if you're managing it sustainably. So that's certification, and that's been since the turn of the century, so 20 years or so. Okay. Now we have the politics going on right now about the old growth, and so that's a big issue that will take a while to sort out. Anyhow, yeah. Give you everybody's still there. Okay. So what you're probably interested in, well, maybe you can tell me what you're interested in learning tonight. What are the questions that you have on your mind?
What is it called?
Silva is Latin for tree, I think. Yeah. Yeah. Instead of agriculture. I don't know what agri is short for, but soil. Okay. It's the difference. They dig up the soil, grow trees. Yeah. Okay.
You got no cougar story?
Not many, no. I didn't see many cougar. I saw one at Franklin River that was on the road and it jumped up a bank about that high and gone. Never saw it again. And there was cougars at the head of Powell Lake by the camp, a mother and 3 cubs one time. And that's about all the cougars I ran into. So there you go. That help you, Bill? Okay, here's, I didn't mention this. This was 1974. This was 1974, and these are Roosevelt elk or 1994, I'm sorry, 1994, and that were let loose, made out at the store. Free to creep. Seven of them. So that's new. And that's a really problem for foresters because they were like cedars. So we're dealing with that. Where I didn't have to deal with that. I had to deal with deer, but not with that. In 1990, there were 7 of us foresters that were invited to go to Germany and Switzerland and France to look at their forest management and what they did over there. And I went from Stillwater, and the other foresters from the island went along with us. We went and they showed us around all the different things that they did to manage their forests. And so we came back with the idea of trying some of them out. And so we established Paradise Valley trials if you're going up Duncan Street, if you're looking straight ahead, it was just in those trees straight ahead of you there. That's where we did these trials. It was an area of 160 hectares, I believe. And we did a whole bunch of different things. You're not going to be able to see the details, but this is what the plan looked like. But we did a lot of different things up there. We did some things in this particular area here. We did a small clear cut with weed trees. We had what was called an overhaul, where we took all but 40 of the best trees, 30 of the best trees per hectare, and we got those there for natural trees. And develop a nice plan of those trees. We did some a lot of small patch cuts. These were 60 feet. Small ones were 15 by 15 feet by 15 feet. Problems we have all the wood inside a small block, you end up with a big pile of slash. Lenses here. These lenses, when the wind is blowing like this, there's less blowdown in their feet, so they have curved edge. We put a curved edge on both of them. And we left a whole bunch of roots and a whole bunch of things. Warehouse. There's a few trials left there, but not many. But anyways, that was all a precursor to announcement that MMD made back in the late 90s that they were going to develop variable retention harvesting. Variable retention harvesting. I'll give you an example. We're a long ways away. I'll pass this around and you can take a look at it for yourself. But basically it means you're leaving some reserve trees behind, basically. That's different than your typical clear cut, right? Okay, so that was an announcement made in the late 90s. harvesting, and that's a big difference than what we have. For those of you at home, I don't know what you can see, but there's lots of leaf trees there. Hang on. And what it has resulted in is a different pattern that I'll discuss, a different pattern that you will see in harvesting when you that view is from the top of Tin Hat Mountain, looking back to the east toward Horseshoe Lake. And I want to discuss this a little at length because it's what they're doing now, as opposed to the clear cuts. I remember in 1971 when I started my forestry studies, there was a picture from the Vancouver Sun on the bulletin board in the hallway, and it was a picture of the Cameron Valley where they had just gone in and started at the one end and just worked their way through, left a fire break in the middle somewhere, but took everything else out just like now. And after I got out of school, I had a job with McMillan Modell in Port Alberni for a year. I worked at Great Central Lake, and the first tree planting that we did was in a valley along the Alberni Canal, and I drove out to take a look at what we were going to have to do. And it was a whole watershed, a whole valley that they had brought all the yarders in from all the divisions around there. They had 13 yarders, cable yarders, logging in that valley in the wintertime. And it was all gone, all of it. So that's what it was like when I started. And this is what it's like now through the efforts of a lot of foresters that have helped us create some change. Oh yeah, yeah, yeah. The reforestation is been going on since the late 50s. You know, all of the tenures that there are that the government has, they all have to reforest. It's just you don't even question the fact. I've had people ask me, why don't you plant more trees than you plant? And I've told them, if we planted every area, we'd have too many trees in some of the blocks because there's natural regeneration, and we want the natural regeneration. We don't want to wait for it all the time, as long as it takes. And if we don't think it's going to come in within a reasonable time, well, then we're reforesting. Yeah. So what you're seeing in those pictures is just part of the story, because I put this map up here. This shows the lower half of the tree farm license around here, and everybody can see them. And there are all kinds of reserves on a landscape basis. You know, at the landscape level, reserves for deer winter ranges, birds, it could be recreation reasons, fisheries reasons, name it. There could be a reserve for any legitimate reason there might be. But at a landscape level, there is a lot of areas that are not ever going to be logged. And then at the block level, which those pictures are of, there are also reserves that are maintained in those blocks. 10%. If you had a 10-hectare area that you're going to log, then 1 hectare of that has to be in reserves. And these reserves, they're in perpetuity unless they are replaced with something of equal value. There may be, for reasons, there may be a good reason to take out some a reserve for some reason. I can't think of it offhand, but there might be, and it could be done, but you have to replace it. That's of equal quality. So what do I say here now? I guess the best thing to say is that we could do a better job at our variable retention than we're doing, I think. A lot of those pictures show individual trees scattered throughout the block. A lot of the blocks I'm seeing nowadays are, the reserves are all on the edges of it. Okay, we've gotten away from leaving some trees within the blocks, and I'd like to see more of that. But it's a great improvement over what we had before. Okay. All right. Have I talked long enough to give you an idea? Is there somebody that just can't wait to ask a question, or you want me? I can keep entertaining. I got a lot to cover. Fire. Another one that we can talk about. When I came here, one of my responsibilities was slash burning, and they up there was taking old tires that's the only time I've heard it, but that's how they lit it. Most of the time people were walking around with their torches. Changed a lot. The helicopters made a huge difference in terms of broadcast burning, because you could control where you lit up and the time that you lit the fire. If you're on I'll give you an example. If you're on a flat land, what you try to do is start it in the middle, create a chimney effect, lighting up your fire. Okay? You can do that by hand on a flat ground, but you can't do that on a side hill. On side hills, you have to burn across the top of the opening. You have to burn across the top of the opening first, and get that fuel burnt up before you can work your way down. And you could do that by hand too, but it sure is a lot better to have a helicopter that can go along with a drip torch underneath and just boom, 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 put a fire line down, let it burn for a while, and then go in and finish it off the way you need to. So helicopters, vital for that as well. In terms of how many fires we've had in the 50 years, it's been pretty good around here. I remember the one fire that was out by Khartoum Lake one summer in July. I can't remember what year it was, but it was one year I had a holiday and decided to stay home, and all I could see was that smoke up there. It wasn't our fire; it was a timber sale fire, but still just staring there and looking at the smoke during their whole life. It was not a good holiday. But I can't really go back prior to the time I was here in terms of the fires. We all know about the fires that went up Haslam and burnt up the Haslam Wall, and the one down at Myrtle Creek in the 30s. Fires, a lot of operations fires, I imagine. But I did have a book here that is a review, 20-year fire review from 1999, made in 1999. This is drawn up. So from 79 to 99. And there were, over those 20 years, there were 38 lightning strikes, 15 logging caused fires, 26, I'll say, recreation fires, and 8 road construction fires. They were all pretty small in size, except for one of the 70. First largest fire. 176. Yeah. The license area. Now this license area here goes all the way up to the head of Powell Lake and into the watershed boundaries. Okay, just back side of Tobin Inlet. But I'll explain that a little bit more here after the largest fire in North, 110 hectares. That Olympic forest products had lit, and it just sat there and sat there and sat there. And we had an inversion in town. It was, you know what it's like in November, and it's all foggy in town, and you go out and you get up the mountaintop and it's nice and sunny. Well, it's just exactly what the conditions were November 25th, 79, and there were 50-mile-an-hour winds up high, and it took that landing and it blew it all over the mountainside where it had been logged. Didn't get into any timber, but it burnt up the plantation that had been planted. And they were having to break the ice on Alpha Lake and take water buckets, or bandy buckets, break the ice to get it. So we were out there in the middle of the night, midnight, clear as a bell, wind howling. Every stump looked like an orange pumpkin. It was incredible. I remember very vividly. And that was the biggest one. No, there wasn't no timber involved. Second largest fire was a lightning strike at Paul Daniels, and that happened in August of '87. That was 98 hectares. And the third largest was 69 hectares in July of '88. That was and that was it was a timber sale just adjacent to the TSL, tucked into the TSL. So in total, there were 90 fires over that 20-year period. 420 hectares were burned. So we're really fortunate here. Last summer, we really dodged a bullet with fires. There were some lightning strikes up the lake. The cabin owners helped put them out and find them and all that sort of stuff. It was wonderful. But it was, it's been, I think, pretty good record around here, not just the TFL and Stillwater, but all the whole area here. Yeah. Yes. Timber sale is where the Forest Service manages the land directly themselves, and they make set up a block to be logged, and they put it up for auction, basically, and the highest bidder gets it. And that's what's happening out toward Inland Lake right now. That area's timber sale. Yeah, this is, brings up a good point right now. I should probably maybe mention it now, Doug. But originally, the tree farm license boundary, came up here, up to Theodosia and the Bunster Hills, and then all the way up around the back end of Paul and Daniels, and then coming down out Stillwater Way. It covered all of this. It covered all of this area, Frail Lake, this whole peninsula there, and all of the east side of Lois Lake, and then stopped right around here, around town here. Anyways, so that was the tree farm license. With all the changes in the ownership, like when a tree farm license passes from one company to another company, the government takes a little of it for themselves. Okay. And also with all the native issues, as they had to establish some tenures for them. So right now, the side of Haslam Lake, that's part of the Simon's territory. One of the things that they have to our community. All right, community forest located around here. This area here comes down in here, somewhere around like that. So we're the east side of Haslam, and Slam is on the other side. But all of this area on the east side of Lois Lake now, this was all taken away and put into timber sale. And so the Forest Service is managing this now, and they are putting it into sales out there. That's the difference, Doug. There's been some other little chunks taken away here and there. But for the most part, all of this area, this is all still block 1, tree farm license 39. Okay. How are we doing? Okay, what else? How's that for an introduction? Shall we discuss? Yeah. Yes, that was. No, very seldom just one. Well, absolutely. Uniform, even in the flat areas. But we will have high spots, and Plus, you have to consider what the actual regeneration is going to be. Here, yes. Yeah. Well, yeah, it is. And there's a lot to learn there. There's a lot to learn there. Pardon? No, maybe, but it's not a prerequisite. I mean, you could, if I had an area that had a high spot here and a low spot here and a high spot there, I probably could grow Douglas fir on all three of them and they'd all go just fine. But the cedar might grow a little better in the low spot. Yeah, sort of thing. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, but we've had mixed plantations for a long, long time. But what you will see right along the coast, where it's driest, you will see a preponderance of Douglas fir in the stands, because this is their type of ecology. Yeah, yeah. Okay. Yeah.
Thank you so much, Rod, for being with us tonight.
Oh, okay. No question? No questions? Yeah. Sorry, I did stay in the screen all night.